Well, thank you so much.
They have a forum on it called What to Do When Someone Dies. It's a checklist, and it goes through all the different tasks from the early days all the way through. It's the legal things, it's the financial things, it's everything. So when your head is whirling with all the different things you think you have to do, that's a good checklist to look at. And really the immediate things you're probably going to have to do is sort out things like household bills, potentially. Just keep those sort of things ticking over. In my case, it wasn't too difficult because I'd always been the person that handled the bills and the finances. So sorting that out wasn't too hard. For my mother, when my father died, my father had always handled the bills. So suddenly she was on her own and she'd never had to do any of that before. So I had to sit down with her and help her with that. So you're going to have to take over the household bills and the budget. You probably need to protect your income fairly early on as well. There may be a worry about what will happen to the income. And so there are things that you need to address there. There will be other things like loans, credit cards, the mortgage, all of those things. That's another thing to look at. And you need to think about insurance, taking over the household insurance, the car insurance, the life insurance, all of the insurance things. And then you can start thinking about planning for the future. So I'm going to talk about each of those things in turn, fairly briefly, but just to give you an idea of the sort of things to look for. And this really applies whether it's you that's bereaved or whether you're supporting someone else. Because it helps if you are supporting someone else, if you do have an idea about these different things. So the regular household bills is the first thing to tackle. Most of them will have a bereavement department, which is helpful, and it is well worth asking to speak to those when you ring the customer services. With my mother, we sat down at the kitchen table, we got all the bills out, we sat side by side with the phone, and we phoned each of the companies in turn. So I made the call, explained why I was calling, passed the phone to my mum, who gave them authority to speak to me, phoned back to me, and then we sort everything out. And we rattled through most of the utilities in an afternoon that way. We spoke to my father's pension providers that way, and we got a lot sorted out in that respect. And that was a big weight off her shoulders because she'd never had to handle those sort of finances before. I think at this stage...
Just ask a question there. So
Sure.
Your mum had to give permission for you to speak. Was that because she was the named executor of the will, executor of the will, or was that because she was next of kin and therefore she had the authority to speak?
Most of the household bills were in her name,
Okay.
or my father's name, in fact, or joint names. So to actually give the information, they wanted to make sure that she knew someone was phoning up and saying my father's died. So because I was making a change to the account holder.
Okay.
So they needed to be sure that they were speaking to someone who was speaking on behalf of my mother and not just a random person phoning up. The same with the pensions, because they are, potentially giving out quite personal information over the phone. So there is usually a routine to go through. This is very typical with most financial institutions, most insurance companies. They're very conscious now to check your identity when you ring up. So if you're trying to help someone out, you will often either need a letter of authority signed by them, a power of attorney if you're acting legally on their behalf, or, like I say, the easiest thing is if they're beside you to give that authority. That keeps it ticking over. So the key is to stay organised, is to have a checklist and work through it, tick them off as you go and as you get confirmation back from them so that you don't miss any out. It's a good idea to review the bank statements just to spot any less regular payments that you might have missed. I think most of us think quite quickly of the monthly ones, the normal ones, but there may be some less common ones that you need to pick up. Considering the income, so if there is a claim to be had on pensions or life assurance policies, anything like that, bereavement benefits from the government potentially, get the claims in early. and allow a little bit of time for those to come through. If the person who has died was receiving pensions or benefits, you need to tell them early that they've died. Many of the benefits and pensions will include an advance payment, so there may very well be an overpayment that will have to be paid back. So you need to remember that. The third thing to do is to then track down the credit cards, the loans, the mortgage debts. Don't ignore them. They will all have a bereavement department typically that you can ring up and tell them what's happened and ask for some time to sort out the details. Because in parallel to all of this, there could be the legal side and the probate and the executorship that Fiona was talking about yesterday. All of that will be going on in parallel. So these people will understand that they need to wait. Some of them will try and get you to settle up debts and loans and so on quite quickly. It may be you need to establish whether you're actually liable to do that or not. So take some advice if you need it. It may be the estate is liable. It may be the debt dies with the deceased. And it may be it's a joint loan and therefore the remaining partner is still liable for it. There's all sorts of different combinations and possibilities. So it's important to be clear about those. And then fourthly, there's the insurance companies taking over the car insurance, maybe updating the life assurance, the house insurance, all of these things. So those activities will all happen alongside all the other stuff that may be going on from a legal point of view. So in the light of all of this, there's obviously going to be a lot of changes financially to take into account. And this is where a personal budget is helpful, because it will identify all the income that is coming in and it will identify the expenses going out. And it's important to understand those, because you may have to make some decisions about whether there's enough income coming in to pay the bills. You might be worried how you're going to cover the household expenses. You might want to think about whether you'll need to move house, whether you want to make some changes to your lifestyle, whether you want to downsize, maybe you want to move to a different part of the country. So all of this, you need to understand your financial situation. And this is what a personal budget does. So let's have a look in a bit more detail about a personal budget. So first of all, it's a list of all your incomings, so all your income that's coming in, pensions, regular income, benefits, payments from other people, rental income. I'm sure you can imagine the list goes on. And then against that, you offset the expenses. There's a lot of ways of creating a personal budget. You could do it quite simply on a piece of paper. You could just jot down the values on a piece of paper. You could create a spreadsheet and fill it in a spreadsheet. That's another way of doing it. There are some budget planners available online, and I'm going to show you an example of one of those. You can buy applications, such as You Need a Budget and Mint, you might have heard of those, that will let you create a budget and save it within an application. Some of the banks offer an analysis of your current account spending as well, if you look online. So there's all sorts of different ways of doing it. What I would recommend is some sort of planner where you can save your results, because that way you can try out some different scenarios and you can set up your current scenario, and then you can look at what would happen if you had some different income or some different expenditure, and you can model different setups. So Emily, would you like to show the first chart just to get an idea of what?
Sure, I'm sharing that now. So and let me just oh no, I'm sorry about that. Okay, for some reason it has just failed. Of course it has. There we go, share. And I'm going to, sorry, this is meant to be in presentation mode. There we go.
So there we are. So there you see, at a high level, that's quite a summary. But what it will show you is your income, which is a total of all the different forms of income that you may have. And then there will be a breakdown of the expenditure and outgoings. So you can see there it's been divided up into household bills, living costs, finance and insurance costs, family and friends, expenditure on travel and leisure. So this is quite a useful snapshot to show you where you are. And in this case, the outgoings are less than the income, which is a healthy position to be in. And that gives just a quick snapshot of what's involved. So how would you prepare a personal budget? Well, the best way to start, I will give you a link to the money advice service so that you can produce one of these yourself if you're so inclined. There is an option to log in, which then gives you the option of saving your budget and going back to it. So I would recommend you do it that way so that you don't have to start from the beginning every time. What you really need to do is collect together your bank statements, credit card statements, ideally for 12 months or so. Have your utility bills to hand, insurance policies, if you've got statements for loans, mortgage, rental statements, anything related to the incomings and the outgoings. And then you use the personal budget plan to capture all of those. And you need to work through it. It's quite detailed, but it's helpful in that respect because you can drill down to the individual costs. So Emily, if you want to show the next chart, that gives you an idea of the levels of detail. So here's an example. This is just the category under household bills, and you can see you've got different categories across the top, and each one of those has elements within it. So this is mortgage and rent. So I filled in a nominal amount there of £400 a month on the mortgage. If you're paying rent instead, you would fill that line in instead. There may be other items to fill in. So each of the headings goes down through these different categories. You would normally work out your budget on a monthly basis, mainly because most people's expenses and income these days, I think, is coming in on a monthly basis. You can do it weekly if you prefer. The key is really, you can see when you enter the information, you have the choice of whether it's per month, per week, per year. So you just need to pay attention to getting that little detail right.
Liz, have you got any suggestions? So obviously your personal budget may change kind of if you've been bereaved. Have you got any kind of recommendations or tips for how you might be thinking about things? So obviously if your partner's passed away, then you may lose a second income. Are there any tips or ways of thinking about how your bereavement might impact your budget and how you should therefore take that into consideration when you do this activity?
Yes, I think the idea is that if you're already reached the situation of being bereaved, then this budget should be reflecting your situation as it is now. And you may still be trying to work out some of the impacts of the changes. So for example, with my mother, she was reliant on pension income, and there was her pension and my dad's pension, and we didn't know what was going to happen to my dad's pension. So again, we sat down and rang them up, and they were very helpful. They had a bereavement department, and they gave us a value on the phone so that we could see straight away what the impact was going to be on her income. So you would need to identify the bits that were going to change, and you may have to make some phone calls, you may have to wait for some information. If you're a beneficiary as well, you may not know how much money is coming, but again, that is something that may be helpful in the future. What else would be affected? Things like loans and mortgage, there's quite often insurance associated with those to cover some of the payments, and again, you're going to have to work through all of those different elements as you get to them to see what the impact's going to be. And it'll be lots of little things rather than one big thing, typically, is what we see. So It takes a little bit of time to work through these, but it is worthwhile, because unless you know the exact budget, it's very hard to know whether you're going to be able to manage or not, or what changes you may need to make. And it's very easy to get very overwhelmed and feel quite worried about things like this. So one of the tricks that people sometimes use is to have a separate bank account to pay the household bills. That can be quite helpful to do. And I set this up for myself when I went through a relationship breakup, and I was very worried at the time about whether I could afford all the household bills. I honestly didn't know whether I was going to be able to pay them all. And so I set up a separate bank account just for the bills and the direct debits. And I worked out I needed £600 a month to pay the household bills. And so I transferred £600 a month at the beginning of the month into the household account, and then all the direct debits came out of that. The other stuff I did was I stopped spending on credit cards. When I was buying petrol for the car, I would use it on a debit card, so it came out of my current account. So when I looked at my accounts, I could see where I was, and I wasn't surprised by a big credit card bill at the end of the month. So I think the key to having a good personal budget is A, to manage it, and B, to make sure it includes everything, is not to miss that credit card spending, not to miss the withdrawals of cash for incidentals and things like that. So it's a process of going through it, and then you look at your final summary, and the final summary says you should have £300 left at the end of the month, and yet you haven't got £300 left at the end of the month. So either you've missed something, or you're spending more money on food or petrol than you've allowed for. So it's a good exercise to go through it. And one of the things that is important is producing the personal budget is not just a one-off. You need to review it and go back to it. So maybe once a month, once a week, you look at your bank account and you see if the bills you expected have been paid. You have a look and see what bills are coming up in the next week or month to see if you've got enough money for those. And gradually, as you do that regularly, you'll be able to spot where you're spending more than you expected. And it's quite important to get a control of that, so that then you can understand the impact of the changes as well. If you don't understand where your money's going in the first place, it's going to be really hard to cope with the changes. So this is a very helpful exercise, and it's useful in a situation where you're bereaved, and it's useful in a situation where you're going through other changes as well. Or maybe you want to know whether you can afford to retire in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, depending on how old you are. And having a budget is the foundation of that. So one of the other things that often isn't included in these budgeting tools, and I don't think it is in this one, is having an emergency fund. It's very helpful to have some money just put aside in a savings account that's for real emergencies. We all know we should have one, but quite often, if you're finding it hard to manage your money, then that's something that people often overlook. And it's good to have some money to fall back on. So that money comes into play when the washing machine breaks or the car breaks down, and suddenly you've got to buy a full set of tyres for the car. Or maybe something bigger than that happens and you need to repair the roof on the house, in which case you need a bigger amount of money. But again, the principle's the same. And I think putting aside a regular amount into an emergency fund is a good way to have peace of mind. And so that's one of the things that having a structured look at your personal budget helps you do, to identify where the money's going. And quite often with some of my clients, what I did find was that just the method of building up where the money was going, identifying the different payments, quite often in itself, someone would say, gosh, I didn't realise I was spending so much money on this. I didn't realise my Sky TV was so expensive. I didn't realise the petrol cost me so much in the car. And suddenly just drawing up the budget will start to prompt some thoughts about where spending is essential, and where it's more optional. And again, this is key to handling your money.
Liz, I feel like you've read my bank statement.
Oh, really?
This was I had a great shock. I got Monzo, so it tracks all your spending, and you can see. And I was meant to be using it really carefully and putting all my spending through it, so I could almost create a personal budget. And I one day realised I was spending about 30% of my weekly spending between Pret and Costa, and I thought, this is not this is not okay. So, but it was a real shock when I actually started looking at it to see how much I was spending on really seemingly really small things.
Yes, those little things are the budget killers, we call them. So the popping into Pret on the way home, or picking up a few things from Waitrose or the Spa, suddenly what was supposed to be a pint of milk and a loaf of bread is a £20 spend. And if you do that a couple of times a week, it's going to add up, and you're going to blow your food budget. So yes, it's a good exercise, and this is really why I do recommend it for people that are having to tackle big financial issues, and bereavement is probably the biggest of all. So it's important to do that. The other thing to talk about is for people with a lot of debts, and a bereavement can often really put a lot of stress on someone who was previously paying the debts and keeping up. Suddenly you can't keep up anymore. And it's important to look at debt. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but really just to highlight the difference between what we call good debt and bad debt. So good debt is things like a mortgage for buying a house. So you're spreading the cost over a period of time. It's something that typically goes up in value. You couldn't afford to buy it outright, so you spread the cost over time. So that's good debt. That in itself is not bad, provided you can afford the repayments. Student loan may also fall into that category, because you're investing in an education that should give you extra earning power in the future. So I would call that good debt as well. Bad debt is more short term, so it's paying money over a period of time, paying interest on something that isn't going to hold its value, or maybe even lose its value. So I'm thinking of things like household items, cars. Quite often a car will depreciate in value. If you sold it tomorrow, you couldn't pay the loan back with the amount of money you'd get. So that's not such a good debt. So if you have a problem with debt, it's important to get the proper advice. And for that, I would recommend Step Change, who you can find online. It's a government-run organisation, so they won't charge you for helping you sort out your debts. There are some private companies that will charge you. So that's really all I'm going to say about debts. What next? Where can you get more help? So if you've gone through the process of drawing up a budget, you've handled your debts, the money's coming in, the beneficiaries are being paid and so on, and yet you've still got a problem covering your costs, then you need to look for some help. And the places to look for help, again, the Money Advice Service will help you find your local Citizens Advice Bureau. That's one place you can go for help. There are also community money advice charities as well, who will do a longer version of what I've talked about in a bit more detail to help you draw up a personal budget, and to help you contact debt advice charities if that's needed, and really to sort of work through that process. Now, these charities are obviously operating under very difficult conditions at the moment, like most organisations, and they're trying to do some help online. They're pretty overwhelmed with demand, and I can't see that getting any easier given everything that's going on. So if you are struggling and you need some help, then ask for help sooner rather than later. Most of these problems don't get any better by ignoring them. So it's a lot better to face up to them and ask for some help. And there is some help out there, but there's a lot of demand for it, especially at the moment. So you can do some of this online yourself with the budget plan that I've shown you, and that's a really, really good start, because that's exactly the sort of information any of these organisations will want from you. And really, you can carry on with this budget for life. Once you've tackled the short-term issues of covering your day-to-day expenses, then you can start to think about the longer-term things. And when you start thinking about whether you move house, whether you downsize, whether you can afford to retire, your budget will help you no end, because you'll know how much money you need to live on. And it's just the same with the bereavement. You know, the advice is not to make big decisions too early, too soon. Give yourself some time. But again, you'll find that the budget helps you, and it gives you those choices and options. You can model the different options in front of you. So, Emily, if you want to show my final summary chart, which is where you can get some more information. So these are some of the just 3 very simple links of places where you can get more information. So the first one, Money Saving Expert, What to Do When Someone Dies. That's a great checklist. You don't need to panic. You can just work through it step by step, do as much as and when you want. That's a really, really useful help, because it's very hard when the worst thing happens and you don't know where to start. It's really useful to have something like that. All the forums on Money Saving Expert, there are people manic about saving money on there. So if you're looking for ideas to cut your budget and your expenses, how to get cheaper electricity deal, how to renegotiate your mortgage, get a better deal on your car insurance, there are so many ideas on there. And that's a really useful help for anything like that. The Money Advice Service is a government-run website. It's really good. It's got a lot of advice and some step-by-step guides there. That's where you'll find the budget planner. So again, as I said before, make sure you register so you can save it and come back to it. And if you need to find a local organisation to get money advice, there is a search facility on that website to help you find the local Citizens Advice Bureau or the local Community Money Advice Service. So that's really helpful too. And finally, if you have problems with debts, then Step Change, again, government-run website. It's a charity. It will help you step by step to work out what you need to do and how you can get through it. So those are the 3 resources that I want to leave you with. I will summarise just a little bit about what I've talked about. So I think, again, the most important thing is to look after yourself and to do what you're ready to do. Accept offers of help, prioritise, deal with the essentials first. You don't have to do it all at once, and don't make the important financial decisions too early. Take your time and make sure you're making the right decisions for you. And then finally, with the benefit of having a budget planner, you can then start to look ahead and you can start to plan for your future with a bit more confidence.
Thank you, Liz. That was really, really great. And I think it's really helpful kind of breaking it down. I know something I find like thinking about money incredibly overwhelming and stressful. Have you got any tips for that? I know you're not a therapist, but for that, do you have people that come to you that are quite distressed, and what is it? Do you think there's a mental block that people have about money as well, or is there anything that you'd advise? I mean, I've been saying that I've been planning to do my personal budget for, I think it's been on my to-do list for a year, and I'm slowly falling into debt. I shouldn't say that, but what is your tip for kind of actually getting down to it?
I have thought about it over the years, working with different people and just sort of seeing the different way people approach it. One of the very common things that I think that people do is the head in the sand. If I don't open the letters from the bank, miraculously they don't exist, but of course they do. So not facing up to things, I think, is one sort of very common approach, and it will typically take a crisis for people to seek help. So I would love to see people just planning ahead a little bit more, being a little bit more organised, and try and avoid hitting that crisis. Try and plan ahead a bit. We all have a very strange relationship with money, and many of us spend money to make ourselves feel better. But you have to be conscious of that, and maybe you can afford little treats, but it's when it gets out of hand, it gets too much, and only you really know when that's happened. But we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. We all deserve a little bit of happiness and things in life. So just be more mindful about how you spend the money. Spend it more thoughtfully, and make sure it's what you really want to spend your money on, and don't waste it on things you won't even notice. And the beauty of doing a budget is you start to look at it that way. And so many clients will say, I didn't realize that's how much it cost me, and they're already making the decision of that's not worth the money I'm spending on it. So that's why it's a really good start. So that's my main hint and tip, is to look at everything and say, do I want to spend my money on this? Is it really worth it?
Yeah. Has anyone got any questions for Liz? Just going across. You were incredibly comprehensive, so I think those resources are really, really useful as well. And yeah, in terms of that kind of finding, I know we spoke about this briefly, but where, I think someone asked this earlier, where all of the debts and payments are that or income and outgoings. So I think we spoke about this a bit yesterday. You can kind of look at someone's bank statement. You can wait and see if you get any letters from anyone. Have you got any other tips for how to find debt and credit for maybe a parent or a partner who's deceased?
Yes, there's a couple of ways, and one of them is certainly the 12 months worth of bank accounts. Look through all the payments and try and identify what they are. The hardest ones to spot are maybe the once a year subscriptions, things like that. They're very easy to miss. The things that come out every month are obviously a lot easier to track down. Partner may not even know that their partner had a subscription once a year to the aircraft club or something like that. It might not be something they were aware of, or that they made a charitable donation once a year to a particular fund. So you might have to do a bit of detective work with those. So looking through the bank accounts. I think what you find as you go through the executor process, if you're an executor, is as the accounts are closed, some of those will prompt letters coming out of the woodwork because the payments won't be made. So that's one way to do it, but that's a slow way of doing it. If you've got someone with debts and unknown accounts, then you can do a credit search, and you can use a company like Experian that will list all of the current accounts, typically credit cards, loans, any account involving credit, like a clothing catalogue, that sort of thing. Those should all show up on an Experian report, and there are other companies available who will also do similar credit searches. They don't all have the same results, so occasionally it's worth doing more than one. And you can sometimes sign up for those on a trial basis, so you can use them at no cost at all.
I was going to ask how much they cost, but that's
yeah. Again, Money Saving Expert has got a lot of resources and a lot of advice about how to really get the best out of those companies, and explains how they work. So that's a way of tracking down the debts and so on. Fiona yesterday, in her legal one, it seems she has a specialist facility available that I think she talked about. It was a state search or something like that.
Yes, I actually have let me find the name of it. I think I have it on my computer. It was Death Notification Service.
Yeah.
And it's a register. I had a look at it today. It's so deathnotificationservice.co.uk, and it's a portal that you can search for any kind of bank accounts under someone's name, but not all the banks are subscribed, and not everyone's subscribed to it. So it will kind of do a chunk, but not everyone. As far as I can tell, I don't think it says who is and isn't subscribed to them, which isn't very helpful. No. But I need to do a little bit more a bit more of a look into that. So, but it looks like a good start.
Yes, it is, and I think it's a reminder to all of us to try and sort of keep our affairs in a slightly tidier order to make it easier.
I'm going to get off. I can tell already that the sort out my budgeting is going to get bumped up to the top of my to-do list. So that's one for the weekend. This weekend, yeah. I think. Yeah. It's thank you so much, Liz. If I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I think it's really helpful to talk through these things, and I think for all of us as well, it's not just something you should do as a reaction, but as you said, it's something to do proactively and actually keep on top of at any time in your life. So which makes it both easier for you and the people around you should the worst happen as well. So thanks so much, and yeah, we're really grateful to you for doing this, and it was really valuable. I think I've got to go and get my affairs in order, so thank you, and we'll be emailing out all of the links that Liz shared after the event, and also asking for feedback. So thank you everyone for joining us, and yeah, have a nice evening. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.